Hello and welcome back to the Finish More Music podcast. So we are absolutely up and running now. This is the return of the podcast after an 18-month hiatus. The last episode was the story of where the podcast's been, where I've been, and this is part 2. So if you didn't check out the last episode and you've just landed here, I strongly recommend stopping this, jumping back, because when you listen to this, it isn't going to make a whole load of sense. And there's a real arc to the story that needs to have a part 1 and a part 2 to it. Let's put it that way. Now, I also know that it almost certainly wasn't what any of you were expecting, right? So the podcast comes back, fireworks, woo, streamers, everything's amazing. And then I drop a story that is actually quite dark, and it's a different tone to the podcast than we've ever had before. And that is important because the story is going to give context and meaning to not only some really profound life lessons that I want to share with you, and it's always important to me that I'm candid and honest with you and that I share the things that I know. It's a big part of what the podcast is about, but it's also informing the new direction of the podcast and the slight different tone and different angle that we're going to take in this journey together. So it's important that I tell the story, and we will get to the changes and the lessons in good time. But first, we've got a story to finish, right? So before we do, I just want to say, oh my gosh, what absolutely huge hearts you guys and girls have got. I was blown away. Like the messages that I've received, emails, comments underneath the YouTube video, on Instagram, DMs, comments underneath the videos there. Just what incredibly huge hearts you have. The messages of support, kindness, compassion, offering to talk and reach out and sharing your own personal stories with me was just absolutely incredible. And thinking about it, I think actually it's worth putting a flag in the ground where we can all see it here. Very often in this day and age, I think our eyes get drawn to the trolls and the people who are saying spiteful things and putting people down. We know there's a lot of it online, right? And it can be easy to get caught up in this idea that that's predominantly what the internet is like. And I know that it puts a lot of people off, and maybe you can relate, from posting your art and from posting your tracks up and commenting and sharing, and from being your authentic self and being vulnerable. But if you want to, and I strongly suggest doing it, really drink in the fact that there are beautiful souls on the internet, then go and check out the types of comments that I've received. There are amazing people who will lift you up, protect you, support you online. And they're the people you want to connect with, and the other people they're just noise, right? They need to work on themselves, as within, so without. The way they project out into the world are the struggles and the internal dialogue that they're dealing with themselves. So I think there's real value in going and reading that and realizing the wonderful, wonderful people that there are. So a huge thank you. It is an absolute blessing to be able to serve you, and I do not take it lightly, I promise you. So, as I said, if you haven't checked out the previous episode, you're going to want to jump there now. If you have, then you may remember that I went through one of the scariest, most terrifying times in my life, most terrifying experiences that I have ever faced. And towards the end of the episode, I'd gotten out the woods. Like, life was on the upward curve. I was back to my good old self, and I thought, that's it. You know, I'm almost at full recovery. As it turned out, that wasn't even close. There was something else around the corner for me, and this is the story of what happened next. So it is only right to let you know that if the first episode for you was a little unsettling or upsetting, we are going back there again. So you know what's up ahead. But if you're up for joining me on the journey and finding out where this went and the lessons that I learned, then deep breath time. And let's do it. Okay, so let's have a very quick recap of what happened in the first part of this story. So I was diagnosed with clinical burnout. My life was turned upside down and inside out. It was a terrifying time where I had accelerated sort of thoughts that I couldn't even grasp. I felt like I was underwater a lot of the time, unable to think for the speed of thinking that was happening, suffering with insomnia. And at one point, you may recall, I described this sort of vision that was in my head that I was standing on the edge of the abyss, this sort of super dark black abyss, and I was teetering on the edge. And that one step forward, falling into the abyss, represented me being like this for the rest of my life, being a madman and going into a mental hospital. They were the thoughts playing in my head, the little things that I would be able to grab, and then something else would come and scramble that. And scrambled thinking is perhaps the best way I can describe it. And then with the care of my incredible wife and the other Anna in my life, my mindset coach, who's also an expert on burnout, and clearing the decks and clearing my workload and doing almost nothing, like a few hours a week. And if we could avoid that, we would. Over the space of a couple of months, I managed to start to recover. And what that looked like was that I was more me and less this crazy stuff going on. And sort of the scales were tipping until that died down and it was gone. But there was still this situation, and you might remember I talked about this underlying tone that I was experiencing, almost a sense. It was there. It's something that I can't describe, but it was palpable. And some days I would wake up and it was just there in the background. And I treated that as like a little warning signal. Hey, take a day off. And I had an agreement with Anna that I would just let her know and she'd be like, fine. And she'd pick up the slack in the business and she'd reorganize everything. Like incredible woman taking on a huge workload in order to protect me and look after me. And that was becoming less and less. I was on the up, and to me, I had pretty much fully recovered because these days were few and far between. It was like out of the woods, and I was feeling like my good old self, and I was all excited about the new projects we were going to do, what we were doing in FMM, and all of this good stuff in the mastermind. Really, really exciting. And everything was going well. And then one morning, I woke up and I felt like $1 million. I was like, I'm back to my good old self. Everything is absolutely fine. Jumped out of bed, excited to take on the day. And I go into the bathroom and I start brushing my teeth, looking in the mirror. And then all of a sudden, and it really was quick, my energy level just completely dropped down to like 0, tank's empty, just like that. And I felt really, really low. Like really miserable. And I was like, what on earth is going on here? This is, basically this is a bit odd. And so I was like, okay, fine. I went downstairs, grabbed my coffee, and I sat on the sofa. And I just thought, I'm a bit out of sorts. And, chances are you've experienced this yourself. Like for no explicable reason, you just feel out of sorts today and you're a bit low and you're just not up for much. And I thought, well, we all go through that. We'll go through that, right? That's fine. I'll sit here. Let's finish my coffee. Let's get the caffeine sort of buzz, and that'll probably sort this out. And I finished the coffee and I got the buzz and I still wasn't really up for anything. Now, I spent a long time learning how to manage my emotions. I've spoken about it a bunch on the podcast. If you're a long-term listener, you'll have received a lot of the information. I share a lot of stuff about this. I coach a lot of people through challenges, limiting beliefs, fears that are holding them back from living their best life in music. So I'm really pretty well versed in this stuff. And so I'm just thinking through different ways that I normally get past this. And one of those things is I'm a big believer in the sort of divide and conquer idea, which is I say, okay, well, what's the first step of what I need to do here to get up and running today? Okay, I've got that. No, I'm not up for that. Okay, what's the first step of the first step? And it literally got down to, okay, we'll just get up off the sofa, go out into my studio and turn my computer on. And then if I don't fancy doing anything, I won't, but let's do that first step. And what came back was, I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered. Okay. So what else? Let's go for a walk, like fresh air, get some movement in my body. That's normally a good idea. And I love doing it. Can't be bothered. Okay, so it's one of those days. And what I mean by that is that sometimes when I wake up and I don't really feel like working too much, unless I've got impending deadlines hanging over me, I give myself the freedom to have what I call a free day. And I'm just like, okay, fine. You know, I've built my life and designed my life and worked hard to build a life that allows me to do that when I want to. And in fact, I always used to do it, thinking back when I even worked, my first ever proper job was as an accountant. And I used to make sure I was ahead of my work. And if it was a beautiful day, I loved getting out on my mountain bike up on the South Downs in the UK. I used to like go into work and say to the boss, look, I'm super ahead. Can I have a day off today? As in a proper holiday day. And oftentimes they were like, cool. So I've always valued that freedom and autonomy in my life. So it's like, okay, free day, man. Do whatever you want to do. Anything. So that was the question. What do I want to do? And the answer came back very clearly, nothing. I don't want to do anything. Now, I want to just, I guess, draw a line in the sand here where you can see this. This was nothing like I was experiencing with a burnout. There was no scrambled thoughts or anything like that going on at all. I was perfectly lucid. I could think very, very clearly. I just happened to be completely apathetic about everything. I couldn't be bothered to do a single thing. I didn't have the energy to do anything. I didn't want to do anything. I was completely disinterested and miserable. And so that was weird. I had never felt that low before in my life and just that apathetic about life. But, you know, I think we can all relate to feeling apathetic sometimes and feeling a bit low and being out of energy. So I didn't really make a big deal of it in my mind. And sure enough, the next day I woke up and I was fine. And the one thing that I will say about this that I found interesting was that I couldn't touch how I had felt the day before in the same way that the day before I couldn't touch how I felt now. It was like almost two different people in two different worlds. I can describe to you the experience, but I can't feel it. I couldn't like relate to it particularly strongly. It just felt like, oh, it was an off day. But when I was in it, it was so much more than that. And likewise, when I was in it, I couldn't touch what it was to have any kind of energy or interest or be my normal self. So that was kind of interesting, but no big deal. It was done and that was it. It was done. Like week went by, no more of it. I forgot about it, got on with my life and everything was brilliant. About 2 weeks later, it happened again. Same deal. Woke up feeling fine within probably 20, 30 seconds of getting out of bed. This thing just descended on me. And that's probably the best way to describe it. It just descended on top of me like a veil that just came over me. And then I'm in this place. And again, wasn't something that I paid a huge amount of attention to until the frequency started to go up. So now it's like, okay, it's starting to happen once a week. I'm looking at it and I'm going, is this what depression is? Is this what depression is? And so, like most people, I went to good old Dr. Google, start Googling it up, different medical websites, having a look. And sure enough, you sort of have these, as joyous as it might sound, depression checklists, like things that you can go down. Yep, that's me. Yeah, that's it. And I was ticking most of the boxes on most of the websites. But, you know, I still didn't take it seriously. I didn't take it seriously because when I wasn't in it, I couldn't touch it and I was treating it in the same way that I treat having a bad night's sleep. Like, okay, I've had a few bad nights sleep. What can I do? What's the solution? Like, I'm super proactive in solving problems. I don't like to wallow in victimhood or anything like that. That's just not my outlook on life. It's like, this thing isn't as I want it to be. what steps can I could take to make it as I want it to be. So I had a checklist of when I'm feeling like it that I've gotten off the internet. I'm thinking, okay, let's try and get better sleep. Let's do that. And I'm just really taking it as a challenge instead of, a mental illness that is more than that. I couldn't relate to it. And I took an attitude that didn't serve me well in the long run. And so that's fine. This is happening like maybe once a week. And just to really sort of illustrate what this was like, I would be laying on the sofa in our living room, and we could have been watching like a Netflix series that's brilliant and exciting and had the best cliffhanger ever. And I'm really excited to watch the next episode. And I could be laying there and be like, oh, yeah, there's that Netflix thing that I could watch. And the remote control for the telly could be on the edge of the coffee table, a slight stretch away, just arm's reach. Too much effort. Can't be bothered. Juice isn't worth the squeeze. That was how it was. And I would do all of the things. I'd go for a walk, I'd try the food and all the rest of it, try and give my head a wobble. And even though I dragged myself through that, this just would not lift on those days. And then, some way into this, I was on the sofa and these little insidious, sinister thoughts started creeping into me. And the first one was, your work is doing this. This is your work that's putting you in this place. No, actually, Keith, it's more than that. It's you striving and trying. It's you being ambitious. It's you making an effort to be more, to do more, to have more, to give more, to share more. That's what's doing this. Every time you do that, you end up back here. And that seemed pretty darn convincing to me. Yeah, I mean, that was true. I would come out the other side of this, then I'd get back on with a project and now coming to think about it, I'd come out the other side of it and I'd have some other work to catch up on. Then I'd get back on with the project. And just as I started to make progress with it and like move forward in my life in some way, I'm back here. And then everything's harder, everything's stickier. This is more difficult. It's the striving that's doing this. Now, there's a big problem with that for me. Striving, growing, helping people, that's who I am. That's what I'm all about. That's what I love doing. That's what lights me up in life. Just idling and letting life go by, doing just enough to get by, is the opposite of how I like to live my life. And so now I'm in this situation of, am I going to yo-yo between striving and trying and living a really exciting life, and then boom, this sort of depths of despair and misery and malaise that I'm experiencing? Or do I do just enough to get by, which for me is like death by 1,000 cuts? And actually, that ends me up getting back here as well. But I suppose the fall isn't quite as hard, but I spend more time just not living much of a life. And so I've spoken about the inner coach and the inner bully, right? It was kind of like two lawyers going off in my head. The problem was the prosecution always won. And the more these thoughts started to take a hold in my mind, the more frequent the days of depression were, until we went from maybe a day a week to a 48-hour period. So now it's a couple of days. And now I've no idea what's going to happen when I go to bed. Am I going to wake up all right tomorrow? And if I do, am I going to be 30 seconds or 2 minutes into my day and this happens? Or am I going to be all right? And what's really the point of trying if I am all right? Because that leads me to end up back here. What a mess. You can see, catch 22. And that was getting me down and down and down. And then in comes the imposter syndrome. Then the prosecution's on my case about that. Who are you to be coaching people? Who are you to be sharing what you know on a podcast? Who are you to be leading a team? Who are you to be trying to have a positive impact on millions of people's lives with what you do? You know, I'm ambitious. These are numbers that I gun for, right? Who are you to be doing that? Your purpose, your vision, your mission is worthless. You can't even get out of bed. You are worthless. You are no good to anybody. And the problem with this was that the prosecution didn't just say these things, it backed them up. And as much as I would try to have the inner coach, the defense, try to logically argue out of it, it always lost. And the more these thoughts took hold, the more the tables completely turned, and the default state of me as a human being was no longer that of a positive, upbeat person where the down days were the anomaly. Now depression was my default state and the up days were the anomaly. And I distinctly remember this one day. I was in my studio. This is back in Surrey in the UK. And it was a brilliant studio. I loved it, but it didn't have any windows whatsoever because it was all soundproofed. We were close to neighbours. And it was one of Britain's very many grey, kind of grim, cold days. And so the door was shut as well. And so it was dark in there. It was only the artificial lighting in the studio. And I sat on the sofa at the back and I had my iPad and I'm scribbling furiously. And it's the battle of the lawyers. And I'm trying to find that hold, that grip that I'm going to climb out of this. Like I'm determined that I'm going to do this. But every positive argument that I put down for striving for more and for getting out of this and for even trying to get out of it now, it's not even necessarily for striving more. It's like, why try to climb out of the pit? Because I just get kicked straight back down it again. And the effort of trying to climb out the pit isn't worth it, right? And that's where the vicious lawyer was. And it just constantly had a more convincing put down. And I remember the anguish that I felt and the frustration. I'd written pages and pages. I was scribbling furiously, trying to figure out how I'm going to get out of this. And I couldn't. And then I came to, in that moment, what seemed like the only logical conclusion. I was worthless. The depression was me forever. I was forever to be tormented. I was forever to be a burden to my wife, Anna. And the only way to end this taunting, vicious, sinister lawyer was to end me. And I was literally found myself cursing my own brain, the brain that I valued so much for its innovation, its creativity, for the ideas, for the things that I've managed to create in this world, for its intelligence. That very brain had now turned on me and was outsmarting me. And the logical conclusion was I had to starve that brain of oxygen in order for me to be at peace and for me to escape. I literally was now in a place where I considered my own brain to be the enemy. And so now I'm back on the precipice of that abyss. I'm one step away. Only this time the abyss doesn't represent my life ending as I know it, because I'm now going to be a madman forever. The abyss now represents my life ending, period. That's it. This is the conclusion that I've come to, and this is what's got to happen. There's no way out of this. And of course, I'm racked with guilt because what about my mum? What about Anna? How's that going to work? Putting this on them. And I didn't want to, but I couldn't see a way out. And that evening I was on YouTube and I'm kind of looking through things. I'm trying to find some advice, some help, something from someone. And at this point, I hadn't spoken to anyone. I hadn't spoken to my doctor. I hadn't even really explained it to Anna. She knew I was feeling down and that I thought it might be depression, but there was no diagnosis, no therapist. I'd convinced myself that people were just going to make it worse because, a part of what had gotten me into this funk was some of the things that I'd done, and I'd convinced myself more information, more people is just going to make this more overwhelming and worse. And so it's me on my own trying to figure this damn thing out. And I'm in bed and I was like, just sort of, mindlessly going through YouTube videos, trying to find something, again, really apathetic, but trying to find just some little foothold. Could something, diffuse this bomb and give me just one leg up against the prosecution? Was there just one argument that was convincing enough that it didn't have a comeback? And then I thought, oh, there's this guy, Jordan Peterson. You might have heard of Jordan Peterson. He's a Canadian psychologist. He's an author, a speaker, and he's come to some prominence because of his quite brilliant thinking. I don't agree with everything that he says. You don't have to acknowledge someone's brilliance. And I thought, I wonder if he has something to say about it. And some of the stuff he had to say were things that I'd heard before that hadn't really worked. But then he recounted a story of him talking to somebody who had sort of sustained themselves through these really dark suicidal thoughts. And they'd come up with this little thing, and it was as simple as this: you can always do it tomorrow. The thing with suicide is you can always do it tomorrow. And there was something, because that was true, and that couldn't be refuted by the prosecution. And that felt like, yeah, you can always do it tomorrow. Today is terrible. These thoughts are terrible. My life is terrible. I've got no hope. And I didn't look forward to anything. And I should perhaps point that out as well. Nothing lit me up. I didn't look forward to a single thing. I didn't feel that anything in my future was in any way compelling, from the small things like going to a favorite restaurant or watching a favorite show, or, sometimes you get excited about buying something, whether it's a new bit of software or gear or, PlayStation game, whatever your poison is, a football match that's coming up with your favorite team, anything like that. Nothing was of any interest to me. There was just no hope. There was nothing to look forward to. But in the midst of all of that, there was, well, you could always do it tomorrow. And that little nugget sustained me. It kept me going for a few days, and then a few days more and a few days more. And then came a breakthrough, a real piece of my own thinking that enabled me to continue to put one step in front of another. You see, this lofty ambition of helping as many people as I can felt like an impossible mountain to climb, right? I couldn't even get out of bed some days. I just couldn't be bothered to just drag myself out of bed. And I'm not someone who has a lay-in. Like, I'm a proper fidgeter. Like, I can't be doing it. And it's like, oh, let's just have a lay into that. I just can't. I've got to get up, like, aggravated legs, whatever you want to call it. I'm like, get out of bed, And so this concept of being ambitious seemed absurd. But then this thought crossed my mind, and it just simply said, if I could help just one person, just 1%, in fact, hell, just 0.1%, to feel or be on a path that wouldn't lead to how I'm feeling now, whether that's a comment on YouTube, whether that's something inside of my community, answering somebody there or somebody that I'm coaching, if just one thing I could say could just in the tiniest way help them not to feel like this, would that be a life worth living? And the answer was yes. And again, the prosecution didn't have anything on it. And so that continued to sustain me. Now, don't get me wrong, most days I was still depressed. I was suffering. There was this general malaise, misery, apathy. It felt like everything I did, I was wearing lead boots. And you wouldn't have been able to see this either. A few people spotted stuff. And of course, Anna knew. We were at the point with Anna where I would get out of bed and I wouldn't even say a word. I didn't think I was giving anything away with my body language. I'd start getting ready in the morning, and she would just know. And it was just it was palpable, the atmosphere, you know. And think about this as well. Anna was having to live in this atmosphere where everything was drained, and she couldn't understand what was going on. I couldn't explain it. It didn't make any sense. Imagine living with someone who's like, you know, primary default state is optimism and ambition and helping people and all of these things. And I've typically got a smile on my face and telling jokes, and, you know, I'm a pretty high energy guy, and now I'm not. Now it's the complete reverse of this. Difficult to understand. But if you were to meet me, and, you know, there'll be members of the FMM community would have seen me live. People I work with closely in my mastermind group had no idea this was going on. None whatsoever, because I could smile at you. I could even tell you a joke. I could make you laugh. I would look normal on the outside, but on the inside, it was just a husk of me. It was just this emptiness, this void, basically. But I was able to keep going. And then a real pivotal point came for me, which is at the end of, this would be, I think, 2021. So I've had this now for best part of a year. I've been experiencing this, with it getting worse and worse and worse. And now, like, the odd day is a good day. And it came time to rejoin the mastermind group that we're a part of out here in the US with our mentor. We'd had to have a year out because it was COVID, so there were travel restrictions. We simply were not able to get on a plane to the US, so we'd had to have been out of the group. And it came up to the renewal time, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I was like, I can't possibly show up for this thing being like this. But for Anna, it was something that she relished, she loved, the personal development, the growth, and the, you know, despite me feeling like there was no hope, I didn't want to starve hope of any other person, let alone the woman that I love. So we signed up for it. And I remember the intro call, which was over Zoom, and that happened in January. And it was truly horrible. Picture, if you will, people introducing themselves, ambitious, enthusiastic, energetic Americans. Right? Now, I love this. It's one of the reasons that we live here in the US. I love that energy levels are much higher. You know, there's a tendency to have a lot of sort of dour, self-deprecating behavior from the British people, and there's a beautiful humor with it. And of course, I love my home people. I really adore them. But there's much more energy that typically is going on in the general American person. And I think most people know America's like got a lot of yeehaw cowboy, let's go, this is amazing type of attitude. Now imagine that. One person after the other, them sharing their ambitions. This is what I'm going to achieve this year. This is the best thing ever. And here I am sitting there. I can't even get interested in my breakfast. Do you know what I mean? And it just made me feel smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and tinier and worse with every share. And then we go on, and there I am, fake as can be. Oh, I'm so excited to be in this group, and we're going to achieve this and all that. Just complete bullshit. Didn't believe a single thing I was saying. It was completely fake, and I got off that call, and that's what the prosecution was on me about. You are a fake. You are a liar. You are this. Now I've got this barrage on me as well. So I think it was like end of February, beginning of March. It's time to get on the plane and actually go and be in a room with these people for 3 days. And I said to Anna, I can't do it. I just can't do this. You know, please just go, have a great time, bring back what you learn, but I just can't do it. And Anna was mortified. We do absolutely everything together. We're, you know, absolutely blessed. She's my soulmate, and we do just anything and everything together pretty much, you know. And so she was devastated, and I wasn't going to go. And then that little voice came back again. Well, hang on a minute. What if you could speak to just one person and say just one thing that helps to improve their life and put them on a path that isn't ending up where you are? Just 0.1%, is it worth getting on the plane, and is it worth going? Now, one of my highest core values is kindness and compassion, and another one is contribution. And so something really resonated with me about that. I wouldn't have wished how I felt on my worst enemy. And of course, it was worth putting one foot in front of the other if I might be able to help somebody else in some way. And so we went. And we went to the group, and I felt like a complete outsider. I'm normally like right in the thick of things. Felt like an outsider, was just putting a brave face on it the whole time. And it was the lunchtime of the second day that I decided, look, I'm going to go and tell my mentor about this, James. And I caught him right at the beginning of lunch, and I explained the situation. I said, I can't see the point in anything. I can't see a point in my relationship. I can't see a point in my business. I can't see a point in any of my goals. That's the number one question I'm always asking myself. And, I'm here because of, I thought I might be able to help somebody else in the room, but, that's just about all I've got. And he said, okay, I've been through something a little like this. I've had some interaction with this, let's say. Go grab your lunch right now, if you're up for it. Bring it back here. I'll get mine, and we'll spend an hour, and we're going to start talking about this, and we're going to start working on it. And that is exactly what we did. And for the first time since it had really gotten a hold of me, I started to feel a little bit of hope. And that was because I put a huge amount of trust and faith in James. He's been a very influential person in my life. And I thought, yeah, if anybody can come up with something, some way of thinking, it's going to be him. And so we did this session for an hour, and I've now got a bit of hope in my life. I don't know what it's going to look like. And we agree that when I get back to England, we'll jump on Zoom, we'll do another session. And we were just really working through different aspects of sort of my past and things that had happened. And then I get back to the UK, and actually we were only there for a few days, and then we flew out to Brazil for Anna's 40th birthday to spend it with her family. And I got to Brazil, same thing. I mean, they're the most loving people, and none of them know. My mum doesn't even know. You're hearing a story that my mum, Anna's parents, have never heard, right? Because I wouldn't want to worry them. And so again, I'm brave-faced with all of them, and I get on this Zoom call with James, and then he asks a really interesting question. And that question is, what do you think got you here? What actually got you to the burnout? And just really relax into that question, not the first thing off your top of your head. What do you think happened here? And I said, truth be told, now that I'm really reflecting on this, I think that what happened was I wasn't listening to my intuition. I was doing what other people wanted me to do. And I was logically sometimes making choices that I felt pressured into making, and other people wanted a certain path for us to go down. And I chose that as the path to go down, even though in my heart, my gut, sometimes you just know, right? You're like, it's the other thing. It's the other thing. I don't know why it's the other thing, but it's the other thing. And I made a number of choices, and I've operated in this way for quite some time, and I haven't listened to my own intuition. And when I really look back at it, that's what I think has gone on here. And we ended the call shortly after that. And we'd done a bunch of other exercises as well, and things that James was helping me with. And I had this really strange situation in that I had this weird feeling. And the best way I can describe it is that it was almost sort of out of body, but not in the, oh, I floated above myself and I'm looking down, but in this way that I felt really detached and disconnected from myself. It's a really weird thing to say. And it was really off kilter, a little bit unsettling, a little bit unnerving, but at the same time incredibly welcome, because by not being connected to myself, I wasn't connected to this depression and how I was feeling. And that lasted for maybe a couple of hours. James had said, like, go and get a walk as well, because we've sort of been down a few different paths here and you want to let this stuff settle in. And I went for a walk and I came back, and then it kind of passed and I got on with the rest of my evening. I was chilling out with my father-in-law. He's an absolute legend. Anna was out. And then the next day was Anna's 40th birthday. And we'd booked a boat to go out on the lake in the centre of Brasilia with her friends. And it was her birthday. And it's just such a crazy coincidence, right? Because it's Anna's 40th birthday. And it's at that exact moment that everything was about to go crazy. It was about to get very weird. And believe it or not, having listened to what I've had to say in this podcast, it was about to get worse. And then it was about to get very, very weird, very, very quickly. And then something would happen that every single person that I've told this story to has blown their mind. It was like something mind-blowing happened. And I know that I said to you at the end of the last podcast that in this episode, we'd get to the profound life lessons. And I promise you, it was my intention that we would get to the profound life lessons. However, as I started to recount this story and just get some shape to it before I hit record for the podcast, I realized that this would take up an episode in itself. And so we got a part 3 to this one, and we're going to conclude it in the next episode. And that definitely will get us to the punchline, so to speak, and how a single sentence that somebody said to me radically changed my life. And maybe, just maybe, it'll change yours as well. So we'll get to that in the next episode. I do want to say, just like I did at the end of the first episode, if you are someone who is suffering at the moment, or maybe this might happen to you at some point in the future, there's a really big takeaway. And I would love for you to really lean into the fact that if you experience any mental health concerns, please reach out and talk to people. I did miss actually a little bit in this story that when things got really bad, I spoke to a doctor, I spoke to a therapist and did sessions, and they helped a little. They did help a little. There was some value in that for me, but it wasn't until we got to this point in the story that there was my person, let's say, which turned out to be James in this. And, you know, I'd spoken, of course, to Anna, doctor, therapist, and, you know, although there was some value in it, my life still felt very hopeless. And it may be you've spoken to people and concluded they don't help, or that they might make it worse, which was something that my prosecution was saying inside of my head. But I promise you it isn't hopeless. It's just that you can't see the hope. And they are two very, very different things. Okay? So I'm no expert. I'm only sharing my experience, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And just because you might be facing the other way at the moment, it sometimes just takes a few sentences or finding your person, and there is a brilliant, incredible way out the other side of it, I promise. So, in conclusion, the final part of the story will be coming in the next episode. Do take care wherever you are. Much love. Thanks again for all the incredible messages of support and the vulnerability in sharing your stories. I love you to pieces, and I'll see you next time.